I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy, where we bring you the stories behind the health headlines.
This podcast is brought to you by Ocean Nasal Care Products, offering easier breathing for people suffering from allergies, sinusitis, a cold, or the flu. Online at oceannasalcare.com.
How well have you been protecting your skin this summer? Is a nice dark tan a sign of beauty or of damaged skin? This is the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
The delights of summer come with some serious downsides. Ticks, mosquitos, and chiggers are just waiting to suck your blood. What's the best way to avoid their bites?
Has the heat been getting you down? If you take certain common medications, you may be at increased risk for heat stroke. What are the early warning signs of danger?
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, we talk about summertime hazards and home remedies to counter bug bites, stings, poison ivy, itching, and blisters. Ask a question or share your own favorite remedy.
First, this news.
In the People's Pharmacy health headlines, sitting may shorten your life. A recent analysis of data from the U.S. National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey concluded that if we could reduce the time we spend sitting at work or at home to less than 3 hours a day, we might live as much as 2 years longer. Watching less than 2 hours of television daily could also stretch life expectancy by more than a year. A majority of the respondents in the survey sat at least 6 hours a day, and most people also watched TV for more than 2 hours daily. The authors point out that these estimates apply to Americans as a whole rather than to individuals. The evidence keeps accumulating, however, that sitting less and moving more is likely to be better for your health.
Do dogs help kids stay healthy? A new study from Finland offers some intriguing evidence that they might. The researchers collected parent diaries on the health of nearly 400 infants born in the Kuopio University Hospital. During the first year, quite a few of the babies developed colds, coughs, fevers, or ear infections. But those infants in the families that had dogs were 29% less likely to need treatment with an antibiotic and 44% less likely to come down with an inner ear infection. Previous studies have shown that children exposed to farm animals as babies are less likely to develop allergies and asthma. This study reinforces the concept that early exposure to some types of germs can help the immune system develop properly.
The idea that drinking cranberry juice could help prevent urinary tract infections was once considered an old wives' tale. Over the years, however, some research has supported this idea. Now, a meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled studies confirms that cranberry capsules or juice can reduce women's risk of a UTI by roughly 38%. The benefit appeared strongest for women who had suffered multiple infections before entering one of the studies. They were nearly half as likely to get a UTI while consuming cranberries in some form. Some cranberry juice is high in added sugar, and the best dose isn't clear. All the same, the investigators and some commentators believe that adding some cranberry juice to the diet on a regular basis won't hurt and might very well help susceptible women avoid urinary infections.
If you need to spend time in the hospital for a planned operation, it may make sense to boost your vitamin D levels first. Recent research indicates that people with good levels of circulating vitamin D, at least 30 nanograms per milliliter, are significantly less likely to catch an infection while they're hospitalized. Healthcare-acquired infections can lead to pneumonia, diarrhea, or sepsis and cause an estimated 100,000 deaths each year. Treating them is costly in time, money, and suffering.
Acid-suppressing drugs have become the go-to medicines for digestive distress. Medications such as Prilosec and Prevacid were once only available by prescription. Now these brands and their generic equivalents are easily accessible over the counter, and doctors still prescribe large quantities of Nexium. Such proton pump inhibitors may have some unexpected consequences that are just now being recognized. A meta-analysis shows an association between the use of acid-suppressing drugs and a 65% increased risk of C. difficile-associated diarrhea. The 23 studies in the analysis included nearly 300,000 subjects. C. diff infections can be life-threatening and are often hard to treat.
There continues to be a great deal of confusion about prostate cancer screening and treatment. That's why there's so much interest in prevention strategies. Some men may have heard that selenium can have a protective effect. Now, a meta-analysis confirms it. Investigators analyzed 12 studies, including more than 13,000 volunteers. As blood levels of selenium rose, the risk of prostate cancer dropped. In another 3 studies, toenails were used to assess selenium status. The risk of prostate cancer was 30% lower in men with optimal toenail concentrations of the mineral. The researchers say supplemental selenium in a man who already has sufficient selenium in his diet probably won't offer any additional protection. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist.
I'm a medical anthropologist.
And today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about remedies for summertime maladies. What do you do for yellow jacket stings, mosquito bites, poison ivy, or swimmer's ear? We'd love to hear about your solutions.
If you'd like to share them, give us a call. The number is 888-472-3366. That number again, 888-472-3366. You can also reach us by email. It's joe@peoplespharmacy.com or Terry, Terry, @peoplespharmacy.com. Or you can even send us a message by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
First, though, we're talking about sun and skin. Your epidermis is incredibly vulnerable to damage from ultraviolet radiation. We talked with an epidemiologist who has studied melanoma. Alan Geller is a senior lecturer at the Harvard University School of Public Health.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Professor Geller.
A pleasure to be with you.
Professor Geller, we love the sun. I mean, you know, a tan, it looks so beautiful. We think it's a mark of, you know, how attractive we are. And yet you, as an epidemiologist, and in particular as someone who has explored the incidence of melanoma, must just get so annoyed when you see people out there basking in the sun without their sunscreen.
Well, that's exactly right. I must say I'm one of those people who I'm perfectly fine with people being outdoors. I think it's great that people are outdoors, and you know we have a twin obesity epidemic as well as a melanoma epidemic, and pediatricians and many health experts recommend, of course, that people spend plenty of time outdoors exercising. So we want people to be outdoors, and our message, though, is to be outdoors, but to be smart outdoors and to not be seeking a tan. You know, lots of people think that it's just burning that leads to melanoma, but in fact we know of many people who say that they don't burn, but they tan, and later on we find out, and they're very surprised that they were diagnosed with melanoma, but they had no idea that just tanning is a key risk factor. So we're really strongly advocating just being smart in the sun, and we can talk as we go on about what some of those sun protection recommendations would be.
Well, why wait? Tell us now.
Let's go for it. Sure. I think our major message is that every part of the skin that's exposed to the sun, particularly during these next few hot, summer months, and you surely called me at the right time. It's 90 in Boston and 95 in Washington, D.C. But we're really saying for people to use a combination of what works best for them to protect them from adverse sun exposure. And that would include sunscreen with at least SPF 30, but it could also include the use of a tightly woven hat to protect the scalp, and it might include trying to take the best use of shade whenever one can. And so it's a choose your cover effort that works. And I raise those different body parts. They're all really important. That melanoma the most serious form of skin cancer, does not discriminate. So the back, about 35% of all melanoma in men is on the back, so therefore we really need to think about shirts and sunscreen, particularly at really early ages. The foot is a really bad place, and we've got to be able to think of some kind of sunscreen or socks when people are outside. The scalp, only about 5% of all melanoma is on the scalp, but about 10% of all fatal melanoma is on the scalp. And so it does gnaw at me a little bit when I see people just outside in the sun on 90, 95-degree days with no hat, no sunscreen. So these are the key places where we see really serious skin cancers, and we know that at an early age we could have prevented many of these.
Professor Geller, does it really make a difference? I think of Australia as a country that has had to deal with an epidemic of skin cancer, and in particular melanoma. They have what they call a no hat, no play guideline. Have we seen changes there?
Yes, indeed. That's a great question. That's one of the major public health campaigns, as well as probably that for cutting down smoking in youth, that we can point to as a major success. So they have a program called the Sun Smart campaign, and they start basically right from the cradle, and they have a wonderful character called Sid Seagull, who is about as popular in Australia as Bert and Ernie are in the United States. And starting in the late 1980s through TV, through schools, through cartoons, they made a big play out of the importance of sun protection. And you're exactly right. They reinforced that in schools, the no hat, no play rule. And so Australia was the mecca, unfortunately, looking at the highest rates of regular skin cancers as well as melanoma in the world. And they still do. But it's the first major country in the world that's begun to notice a slight decrease in that rate of melanoma. And so this would not have been something that could have ever occurred if it weren't for their very, very aggressive campaigns. And one of the things that they've been able to do is through their tobacco tax that exists in Australia, they've been able to turn that around and use the money from the tobacco tax to pay for sunscreen and sun protection programs in the schools, as well as to reduce the cost of sunscreen for the public. So it's a huge public health success. I must say, though, that their data shows that they have a lot of oomph, if you will, from birth to about age 15, and then their 16-year-olds begin to act very similar to many 16-year-olds in other parts of the world. So they have a lot of work to do to figure out how they're going to carry the ball from age 16 on. But at least for those first 15 years, it does. The data seems very promising.
Well, Professor Geller, is there any way to make sunscreen cool?
Well, I know different companies have tried to do that. Some companies, I believe, have tried to change the color of it and make it purple sunscreen. Some just to change the color, to be able to figure out a way, particularly because one of the big problems is that maybe about 25 to 50% of people at most put sunscreen on the right way. And if you could have some kind of way of putting sort of purple sunscreen on, and you'd be able to see places where you've missed, that may be an important clue.
You said people don't put sunscreen on the right way. What is the right way to put sunscreen on?
That's a great question. If you can try and imagine a shot glass, basically the public health recommendation during these really hot days that we're talking about now for a family that's going to be at the beach from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, being out for about 6 hours, is to try and make sure that people put on that sunscreen a little bit before they go to the beach. If they don't, no big deal. It can still be put on when they get there at 10 o'clock. But to try and use that shot glass approach, and then to reapply that every couple of hours, so at 10 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, but to keep that point in mind that I was mentioning earlier, every part of the skin that's exposed to the sun. And so we go to the beach here in Massachusetts, and I watch how parents use sunscreen, and there's lots of education that needs to be done, because you'll see lots of parents just sort of slap it on but not rub it in. You'll see lots of parents put it weakly on the shoulders but not rub it in. They won't put it on the ears. They won't put it behind the neck. So I think the motto is to put it everywhere, to put it on thickly, and to put it on repeatedly.
Professor Geller, when you go to the supermarket or the pharmacy or any of the other places that sell sunscreen, it's pretty confusing. There are so many products out there today. How do you make a wise choice?
That's a very good question. And the range, in fact, if you go to a store, I think you're exactly right. There's still some sunscreen that's sold that's less than SPF 15. So the recommendation these days goes back and forth between the lowest one that people should be putting on is 15, but I think more and more people are recommending 30. So the FDA, as you might know, is going to be coming forward with mandatory guidelines about sunscreen, and those are going to be coming into play December of this year. And you'll see a very different labeling. And the labeling is going to be for broad-spectrum sunscreen. So that's going to have to include UVA and UVB all rolled together. So that will be one very important message for people to be looking to. And as I understand it, they've decided to cap it at SPF 50. So again, that won't be coming until December. But I think the FDA is trying to respond to the point that you're raising to make the choices actually be fewer between SPF 30 and SPF 50, and to make sure that it's broad spectrum so that the families are getting universal UVA and UVB protection.
Why is that important? What's the difference between UVA and UVB?
Well, sunscreen, it used to be, when we're talking about sunscreens that we had in the past, most of those were protective just for UVB. So the nice way to kind of think about it is ultraviolet B, that's basically the rays that are more likely to cause burning. And if you think of UVA, those are the rays that are more likely to cause that premature aging. So A for aging, B for burning. And when we think of how SPF is sort of understood, that's basically just as a protection against UVB rays. But many studies have shown that both UVA rays and UVB rays are injurious to the skin and can cause cancer.
The take-home message for our listeners, Professor Geller, or what would you like them to remember?
Well, I think two things. One is that importance of making sure that every time you're out in the sun over these next few hot months to be using sun protection, blocking, and making sure that there's not a part of your skin that's exposed to the sun. And two, we think a lot about parents and the importance of the number of many different roles that parents can play. One, modeling sun protection for themselves. Two, starting it early. I remember a great quote that someone once said to me that we should be saying to parents, make it fun, start it early, and make it non-negotiable. So it's a really important parent-to-child communication. Number three, for parents to be going to their children's pediatrician and saying, hey, I need an ally here. Can you, as my child's pediatrician, talk with my child about the importance of sun protection? And four, in the larger universe, when children go out to daycare centers and schools, out to pools, I think it would be great if a number of parents could coalesce, come together, and try and work in those places to improve policies so that we have better sun protection wherever our children go.
Professor Geller, thanks very much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Alan Geller. He's a senior lecturer at Harvard School of Public Health.
If you have a remedy for mosquito bites, poison ivy, or some other summertime hazard, we'd like to hear about it. You can give us a call at 888-472-3366.
That number again, 888-472-3366, or email us, Joe or Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Redix Industries, makers of Utter Cream, an utterly smooth extra care cream enriched with urea to moisturize dry, cracked skin. The number's 800-345-7339. The website, uttercream.com.
And by Wellspring at Structure House, weight loss center and residential programs offering more than 35 years of experience in the treatment of obesity and weight-related disorders. Wellspring at Structure House, online at structurehouse.com.
And by Ocean Nasal Care Products, offering easier breathing for people suffering from allergies, sinusitis, a cold, or the flu. Online at oceannasalcare.com.
If you'd like to order a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 864. Oh, you can also find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're talking about hot weather hazards and what to do about them. You can share your story or ask a question. The number's 888-472-3366. If the lines are busy, you can send us a message via Twitter at People's Pharmacy or via email, Joe or Terry, Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com. And Terry, you know, we were talking with Professor Geller about sunscreens and how important they are. And, of course, at the same time, we keep telling people, you need more vitamin D. Well, how do you know when you get enough vitamin D exposure from the sun and then you need to put on your sunscreen?
Well, we recently saw a very clever new device, I guess is what it's called. A little patch that you can stick on your skin.
Or on your clothes or your swimming suit.
And it probably won't hold in water, but it turns color as you accumulate more vitamin D.
It's called the Natural Vitamin D UV Activation Sensor. It's about the size of a postage stamp, and it takes about usually 10, maybe 15 minutes for it to completely change color when you're in direct sunlight.
And at which point you put on your sunscreen.
Yes, and if you want to learn more about it, you can find it at skinhealthtech.com.
888-472-3366 is our number. We go to Roseland, Virginia. Chris, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's your story?
I'm a cultural anthropologist with a background of experimental things, and I found homeopathy about 20 years ago. And I have discovered maybe a dozen years ago that the remedy designed out of the sting venom of bees called Apis mellifica in the preparation of little pellets, not the round ones which don't dissolve so well, but the more soft ones, Highlands and Standard are two brands that make it, is and the most effective thing I have ever found. It's a terrific antihistamine. We've used it on tick, spider, hornet, wasp, bee, anything, and you can put 3 pellets. I had a grandchild stung by a hornet flying in the car one time. We put 3 pellets under her tongue, and I dissolved 3 pellets in my mouth and put it directly on the sting. In like 30 seconds, the whole event is over. And it has also worked when a friend came not bringing allergy medicine against her cat. There was her response to people's cats. She was visiting at my daughter's, and when her throat began to swell up at lunch, she never had the experience before because there was nothing in the house. She didn't have her medicine, and I suggested Apis Mel, and it worked.
Well, Chris, thanks for sharing that with us.
You know, we love cultural anthropologists, Chris, having one in the family, so to speak. So we always love to find out about experiences that anthropologists like to share. You know, the thing that's so wonderful about what you're talking about is you can tell if something works or not. In other words, if you've got a wasp or a yellow jacket sting and it really hurts, and you try a home remedy and the pain disappears in 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or a minute, you know, that's usually pretty good evidence.
Well, one of the home remedies that people like for a sting like that is to cut an onion and put that freshly cut surface right on the sting, and it does take the pain away.
We'd love to hear your remedies for bee stings, yellow jackets, mosquito bites, poison ivy. Give us a call, 888-472-3366, and share your experience.
It has been hot.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hot enough for you? Yeah, definitely. Way too hot.
And consequently, people need to be really careful about heat stroke and heat exhaustion. What's the difference, Joe?
Well, it's important to distinguish between heat exhaustion and heat stroke because heat exhaustion, while it's unpleasant, is generally speaking not life-threatening. So what happens with heat exhaustion, you know, loss of fluids, it can happen if you don't drink enough to replace sweating loss. You get a little weak, you might feel nauseated, a little anxious, maybe some lightheadedness. You've seen people keel over at like at a parade or a baseball game. The pulse is weak, slow, skin is pale and clammy, blood pressure is kind of low, and the best thing to do is drink, electrolyte fluids like Gatorade or even just plain water. Heat stroke, on the other hand, way different.
Mm-hmm.
Heat stroke is life-threatening. It's when your body is no longer coping with the extreme temperatures. So it's like, you have a radiator on your car, and the radiator cools down the engine. Well, the radiator in your body, the way in which heat is exchanged, it begins to fail. And as a result, sudden headache, weakness, disorientation, loss of consciousness. The skin is usually hot, dry, flushed. The pulse is fast and hard rather than weak and slow, and body temperature is elevated. Children and older people can die from heat stroke.
So this is a medical emergency.
Absolutely. Go to the emergency department immediately.
Now, some medications can make you more vulnerable to heat stroke. What are they?
Absolutely. So the antidepressants, the old-fashioned ones like amitriptyline that some people are now using for nerve pain, doxepin, imipramine, nortriptyline, all of those can interrupt your body's ability to dissipate heat. Antihistamines like Benadryl, diphenhydramine, which people are taking this time of year for their allergies, antipsychotic medications like Thorazine, Haldol, haloperidol, even some of the newer ones can get you into trouble, and beta blockers like atenolol, metoprolol, propranolol, all can make it harder to keep up with the strain of the high heat that we're experiencing. Even diuretics that millions of people take to get their blood pressure under control, hydrochlorothiazide, for example. So if you're taking a medicine and the temperature's above 90, 95, 100 degrees, be really careful. Don't spend a lot of time out in the sun. You could end up with heat stroke.
And we go to Wayne in Rapid City, South Dakota. Wayne, what is your remedy?
Hi. Yes, I use urine whenever I get stung by a wasp or a bee, and it takes the sting right out.
Does it?
Now, I guess we don't want the details here of how you do this precisely, but how do you apply the urine?
Well, all it takes is a Kleenex and, to dab it.
Okay.
And if you put the urine in a cup and you just, use a Kleenex or cotton swab or toilet paper, just something to transfer it. I've seen people just pee right on it, but it doesn't really take that much. And
how well does it work, and how fast does it work?
Well, depending on the wasps, I've tried it on just the standard hourglass wasps, and they it takes the sting out very quickly. My son got stung by wasps on his face, like 2 or 3 spots, and as soon as I dabbed it on his face, he immediately stopped crying.
That's always a wonderful sign that a home remedy is working. When the child stops crying,
yeah.
It's like, well, maybe it's not double-blind, placebo-controlled, but if the child is screaming and then all of a sudden they stop crying, it's like, maybe it's working.
Speaking of double-blind, placebo-controlled, and urine, we got a bunch of news reports recently. Some researchers went through the medical literature and they said, urine doesn't work for jellyfish stings, but that's not really what they found, is it?
Well, it's so interesting, and Wayne, don't go away because we want to get your opinion about this. There was an article in the Annals of Emergency Medicine, and they said, well, all those home remedies that people use, like vinegar or baking soda or urine for jellyfish stings, they don't work. Meat tenderizer, forget about it. Well, we thought maybe they did an experiment. No. They looked to the scientific literature. There was no science to support them, which doesn't necessarily mean they don't work.
In other words, absence of evidence is not the same as
evidence of absence.
Right. Okay.
So, Wayne, I don't suspect you spend a lot of time with jellyfish in Rapid City, South Dakota, but we do like your urine for wasp stings. And, the lifeguards tell us that urine works for jellyfish stings as well.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it is, wherever you're at, hiking or picnicking or whatever, and you run into the wasps, you've always got an antidote on you. You just got to go behind a tree or something.
Readily accessible. We love it. Wayne, thank you so much.
And there's another advantage. It's really cheap. It
Right.
doesn't cost anything. Well, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever used urine for a jellyfish sting? Did it work? What about meat tenderizer? Give us a call. The number 888-472-3366. If the lines are busy, email us, Joe or Terry at peoplespharmacy.com.
Well, I recently learned about a summertime hazard that I had not paid any attention to before. It turns out that there was a report in the CDC's publication, Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, and they say that people are getting sick because they're scrubbing their barbecue grills with a wire bristle brush, which makes a lot of sense. They're very effective at getting the crud off. But some of those little wires are sticking on the grill and then getting into the meat. And then when people ingest them, they do a lot of damage. So if you use a wire bristle brush on your barbecue grill, make sure you inspect it carefully afterwards and get rid of any leftover little wires.
Yeah, you don't want wires with your burger. That does not sound tasty at all. All right, let's go right back to the phones. Tampa, Florida. Joan, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's this about a sting remedy?
Hi. I just heard as I got on this part that you said something that vinegar didn't work. That's what my mom used to use, and it does work. And just recently, my daughter got a sting, and I said, put vinegar on it. And sure enough, it stopped. The pain stopped instantly.
Joan, I'm so glad you called to tell us that. We didn't say that vinegar doesn't work. What we said is the researchers said they couldn't find any studies of vinegar that showed it worked.
Well, people should just try it.
You're so right.
Amen. Now tell us, what kind of stings are you talking about, Joan?
Well, this was a wasp sting, but it works with bee stings and stuff too. And my daughter, it was wonderful because she's a teenager, and then, wow, Mom, you're right.
Isn't that amazing?
It's pretty unusual when moms are right for teenagers these days, but that is good news. Again, to us, it's like, okay, even if it's a quote-unquote placebo effect, if the person says, hey, Mom, that worked, the pain stopped immediately, that's good enough for us. So thank you for sharing. A lot of people have said if you put a little vinegar together with a little baking soda, first of all, you get a foaming action.
Oh, yeah. So if you're going to be enhancing your placebo effect, I think you really will because it looks very impressive.
But I don't think it's placebo. I think it really does work. Let's go to Columbia, South Carolina. Sarah, what's this about swimmer's ear prevention?
I'm from Columbia, South Carolina, and I love your show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
I have a remedy for swimmer's ear.
Let's hear it.
I started swimming about 15 years ago and got swimmer's ear, so I went to the drugstore and bought some drops, and it cleared it right up. And I read the label, and it said that it was 5% glycerin and isopropyl alcohol. So I've been making my own ever since and putting about a half a dropper in each ear after I swim and have not had another case of swimmer's ear in all that time.
Sarah, thanks so much for sharing that with us. We really think that this is a great remedy as prevention of swimmer's ear. You can also mix the rubbing alcohol with white vinegar, 50-50. You don't need the glycerin. And as long as you either get the water out of the ear or get this drying solution into the ear right as soon as you get out of the water, it's really pretty good at preventing swimmer's ear.
Now, Sarah, I want you to tell our listeners what it's like to have swimmer's ear, because this has happened to me, and it is so painful.
Well, yes, it is very painful, and it aches, and it just feels like an ear infection.
Well, the difference for me is if you wiggle your ear, just the ear, it hurts like the dickens. Whereas if you have a middle ear infection, it's sort of like inside the ear, and wiggling the ear doesn't make a difference. But the whole point of the exercise is prevention. Thank you so much for sharing your remedy with us today on the People's Pharmacy.
And Sarah said it feels like an ear infection. It actually is an ear infection. Swimmer's ear is an infection of the outer part of the ear.
Terry, I've got an email here. Here's someone who has toenail fungus. And at this time of year, you want to wear your sandals, your flip-flops. You want to just not have to wear shoes and socks and cover up. And if you've got that ugly, thick, brown, yellowish nail fungus, you don't want to show those off. This person says, I had an annoying case of nail fungus and then read about using cornmeal to treat it. I mixed a cup of whole grain cornmeal in very warm water and soaked my toes for about a half hour. I did that for a month or so, and lo and behold, some months later, the fungus started to disappear. I'd had that fungus for many years, so it wasn't any lifestyle change that caused it to go away. There must be something in cornmeal grain that attacks the fungus.
And there is. There actually is something in the outer shell of the cornmeal, of the corn, that is antifungal. I've forgotten the name of it, but we looked it up once, and it's there.
And sometimes people actually use cornmeal against rose fungus?
Right. They'll put the cornmeal on the ground around the roses to help deter black spot. I'm not quite sure how effective it is, but it is an old-timey gardener's remedy. And, Joe, we got an email from Alan in Charlotte, North Carolina. He says his mother was a summer camp nurse for 30 years, and she dramatically reduced the incidence of swimmer's ear by standing at the pool gate at the end of every swimming session and putting 1 or 2 drops of 50-50 rubbing alcohol and white vinegar into each child's ear.
And I bet she had an awful lot of experience with these kids coming down with infections. Well, we would love to hear about your remedies. How about body odor? What do you do for BO or foot odor? These days, boy, you can take your shoes out of your feet out of your shoes, and you can make everybody head for the hills. What do you do when your feet start to smell? We'd like to hear your stories at 888-472-3366 or email us. Joe at peoplespharmacy.com, Terry, Terry, at peoplespharmacy.com. You can send us a message via Twitter at People's Pharmacy or Facebook. Be a friend at Facebook. So send us your home remedies, share your stories. We're waiting to hear from you on the People's Pharmacy. We're talking about summertime hazards today.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon, and the People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth foot cream with shea butter, helping dry, cracked feet feel soft and smooth. 800-345-7339. Online at uttercream.com.
And by Blue Lizard Australian Sun Cream, providing high protection against both UVA and UVB sun exposure. Blue Lizard Sensitive is fragrance and paraben-free with zinc oxide for delicate skin. The number is 800-334-4286 on the web at bluelizard.net.
Today on the People's Pharmacy, we're taking the mystery out of medicine. We're talking about health problems that happen in summertime and hot weather. We welcome your stories about hot weather problems and how you solve them at 888-472-3366. Or you can email us, joe at peoplespharmacy.com or terry at peoplespharmacy.com.
Terry, before we go back to the phones, this is really such an interesting story. This comes from Danish researchers. They looked at 18,000 people with skin cancer, compared them to 180,000 people without cancer, they found that people who used aspirin or Celebrex, ibuprofen, or naproxen were less likely to develop squamous cell carcinoma or even melanoma. The more they use these NSAID-type pain relievers, the better the results. 46% lower likelihood of developing melanoma. So now, we're not suggesting for a moment that you could use a pain reliever to reduce your risk of melanoma. You need a sunscreen too. But it does appear as if these NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, may help protect against some of this skin cancer.
And we're not quite sure why, but in addition, aspirin has been shown to reduce your risk of sunburn a little bit. So if you can tolerate aspirin, take a little aspirin, put on the sunscreen, don't get burned.
By the way, vitamin C might actually reduce your risk of developing some of those stomach problems. Now, of course, it's not a guarantee against ulcers or against, heartburn, but about 250 to 500 milligrams of vitamin C a little bit before, maybe half an hour before you take your aspirin, might be a little bit protective. And also, aspirin is perhaps protective against colorectal cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer, esophageal cancer, bladder cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer. Aspirin is still a wonder drug.
It is, and the price is right.
Indeed. You can't beat 2 or 3 cents a pill.
888-472-3366 for... Okay, we go to Gary in Tampa, Florida.
Hi, Gary. Gary, are you still there?
Yes, hello.
What's this about?
I haven't seen poison ivy down here, but in my home state of New Jersey, I used to get poison ivy all the time. And thank God there's a product called TechNew, like technology and you. And what it does, it gets the oils off of your skin. You also wash your clothes with some of it. Just follow the directions on the bottle, and it's amazing. It just stops the poison ivy from even coming, from developing into that rash that is so easily spread by scratching. And my dad is a pharmacist, and I have taken so many things over the years to treat poison ivy, but this is like a preventive measure, and it's just wonderful.
It's always better if you can prevent poison ivy. You can prevent it if you wash soon enough after exposure. Even with ordinary soap and water, you can use an alcohol-based cleanser to get rid of that urushiol, that resin from the poison ivy that causes the reaction. But you're right, TechNew is, I think they've even got studies that they've done that show it's pretty effective.
We've heard from other people that TechNew is quite effective. And Terry, could you spell that again so that people are going, what was Gary talking about?
It's TECH, like tech, new, N-U.
Now, speaking of poison ivy, once you've got it, what do you do about it?
Well,
I've got something.
Okay.
Here's someone,
and then I do too.
Someone who says, I've used milk of magnesia to clear up poison ivy. I used to get poison ivy all over after clearing the weeds and grass from my mowers in the Texas winds. I had to go to the doctor for a steroid shot to clear it up. One weekend, out of desperation, I wiped all the rashes down with rubbing alcohol, then rubbed milk of magnesia all over them. It worked much better than calamine lotion. The rash stopped weeping and spreading, and best of all, the itching stopped too. It all cleared up quickly. Now, milk of magnesia is the first thing I grab as soon as blisters appear. And Terry, speaking of milk and magnesia, people are using it for just about everything these days. They're using it for body odor. You can put it under your arms and your armpit. You can put it on your scalp for seborrheic dermatitis. You can put it on your skin for acne. I mean, you name it, milk of magnesia seems to be the cure-all. It's magnesium hydroxide. You swallow it, so it can't be that bad when you put it on your skin.
Well, Frank in Raleigh has a slightly different but semi-related poison ivy remedy. He says, I found this week that an Epsom salt bath was tremendously soothing for a serious case of poison ivy I got trimming my mother's hedge. After repeating this for 3 days, the poison ivy was dried up and not itchy. The bath was also soothing for the insect bites. Now, Epsom salts, based on a magnesium salt.
Absolutely. Now, I must say, if you've got really bad poison ivy, there is nothing like corticosteroids. And I'm not talking about hydrocortisone cream. You may need something more powerful. You may need to talk to your doctor. You may need oral steroids. But corticosteroids can ease the itching and relieve some of that suffering, especially for chigger bites. Somebody has just emailed what to do about chigger bites. You know what I do? I use a powerful prescription corticosteroid called clobetasol. If I get it on immediately after that chigger bite starts to itch, it prevents it from turning into a really nasty lesion. Let's go right back to the phones. Terry, let's go to Hacker Valley, Wisconsin. Is that Wisconsin?
No, West Virginia.
West Virginia. Hi, Jessica.
Hello, how are you?
We're well. What's up?
I just wanted to comment on the swimmer's ear.
Uh-huh.
My middle son gets swimmer's ear every year, and we give him a Ziploc full of hot water, and put a thin washcloth over it, and let him hold that on his ear, and it takes the pain away till we can get to the doctor.
So that's basically a hot compress that you've devised.
Yep.
And that can often be quite helpful for pain.
But, Jessica, I think prevention, again, is the best medicine. So you might want to try some of those home remedies, that half and half white vinegar, alcohol, to try and dry out the ear so that it doesn't become infected in the first place.
We are actually on our way to a camping trip, and I plan on stopping and buying the white vinegar so I can do that.
Okay, real good.
Good luck.
Good luck.
And let us know how it works.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. A lot of people have had trouble with chigger bites and fire ant bites. And we actually got an interesting email about fire ant bites not too long ago. And the person said, I live in Florida with lots of fire ants. I garden, so I get bitten. I've tried everything from Diperline, which, by the way, is a prescription corticosteroid, to crushed walnut shells, to jumping into a swimming pool, and none of it has worked. I recently tried benzoyl peroxide. I did it as a controlled experiment because I had 4 bites. I treated 2 of them. The next day, the 2 treated bites were much smaller and less itchy than the controls. I applied the benzoyl peroxide within an hour of being bitten. I sort of scraped off the top of the bite and rubbed the cream into the open bite and surrounding area. So he was using benzoyl peroxide 10%, which is available in acne medicines.
Right. I mean, like Clearasil has benzoyl peroxide. There are dozens of products.
Read the label. You'll find it. He says, I'm a physician and an Army reservist. I think this drug penetrates the skin well, so the peroxide gets to the toxins and neutralizes them.
Interesting theory. No data, but hey, if it works, that's all we care about. Terry, where should we go next? Let's go to Teresa in, how do you pronounce that?
Nokomis, Florida. Teresa, did I get it right?
Yes, you got it right.
Oh, thank you. Let's hear your remedy, please.
Hi, first of all, I just want to say how much I enjoy your show, and I'm so glad that I got through to tell you my story. I was on vacation in Hawaii, and being from Florida, I'm not familiar with Portuguese man of war, and I was waiting, and all of a sudden I felt this tremendous pain, and I had been the victim of what they call locally a pocho, which is a very small Portuguese man of war about the size of a grape.
Oh, my.
And they said, oh, my gosh, and I didn't know what to do, so one of the local people came up and said, well, you need to put urine on it, and you need to scrape it with a credit card. Well, who has a credit card on the beach? So what I did have is I did have the sunscreen tube that pinched in, and I used that to scrape it and received immediate relief. It still hurt for a few days, but it acting quickly, it relieved it, and I just wanted to share that for anybody who's ever had this happen, or if it ever happens to them, how they can solve this. But thank you so much.
So nobody used urine on your...
No. I used my own urine.
Oh, so you used the urine and you scraped.
And you take something, they said to take a credit card or something stiff to dislodge the barbs from the man of war, or I guess it would probably work for a jellyfish also.
Right, and that's actually part of the standard medical advice is this credit card thing to scrape those little stingers out.
Well, they're little sacs, and the sac, if you press on it, you're going to spread the venom. Like if you were to wipe the bite with a towel, that would be the worst thing to do. So you need to scrape off these tentacles, these little sacs, and get that poison off the skin. There are two other things you can do. Now, of course, the urine seems to work, and the pain went away, so that's a great measure. But there's another thing that you can do if you have access to hot water, not so readily available at the beach, we would agree. But hot water tends to, what would you call it, kind of destroy the venom so that it can no longer cause problems.
What's more, hot water takes away itches and presumably can help with some pain.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing your story, Teresa. We really appreciate it.
I have a question. Do you have a solution for chafing and heat rash where you're doing exercise in the summer that doesn't involve powders? I really don't like to breathe in talcum powder or even cornstarch powder, and do you have anything that I could use? And I'll take your answer off the air.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of things that may be a possibility. One is standard antiperspirant, and we actually have an email suggesting that to avoid blisters, you can cover your feet liberally with antiperspirant. It works great because it stops the sweating and decreases friction. And in fact, there was a study conducted by the U.S. Military Academy on their cadets that showed that using antiperspirant on the feet did reduce the number of blisters that the cadets got on a long march. So putting an antiperspirant in the places that are chafing is a possibility. Another possibility, Joe, might be that milk of magnesia you were talking about.
I like the milk of magnesia better because it's magnesium rather than aluminum. And I have to tell you, I'm a little apprehensive about aluminum these days. We've had the opportunity to speak with some aluminum research experts, and we're going to be airing that interview in the near future. But the bottom line is magnesium hydroxide seems to work pretty well, so why not get out the milk of magnesia and give that a shot? Some people say Listerine for jock itch, which is kind of a chafing fungal problem. So good old-fashioned amber Listerine, which also seems to work to kill lice, which is another problem this time of year. A lot of kids come home from summer camp with lice. Well, try soaking the hair in amber Listerine for about, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. Put a towel over the top. That will pretty much kill all the lice that might be there. We have time for maybe one or two more calls. Where do you want to go, Terry?
Well, let's go to Whitsett, North Carolina. Jack, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's your question?
Thank you. My question is, I'm exposed to ticks every day of the week being on a farm, and I cannot keep them off of me. There are 3 varieties now, but I have such a horrible reaction to the bite, and was wondering if you guys had any information about how to deter them.
Yes.
The soft we know is not good for us, and looking for something to keep them away from me as I'm out in the fields.
Well, we've got a couple of ideas, and the first idea is, since you live on a farm, get yourself some guinea hens. They eat ticks, and they'll radically reduce the number of ticks hanging around in your farmyard. So that's number one. Number two, obviously the best repellent is one that you say you don't want to use too often. It's something that contains DEET. Skin So Soft, I think, doesn't contain DEET. I think it has picaridin or one of the other more natural repellents.
Well, what we do is we soak our socks, our shoes, and even our pants legs, if we're wearing pants, in one of these
permethrin type
repellents. And, the ticks are less likely to crawl up your leg when you have some sort of repellent there. Sulfur powder, you can get it in the pharmacy, can also repel ticks. And
I thought that was for chiggers.
And chiggers. I mean, most crawling insects don't much like sulfur. So those would be the things that we would suggest. But really, I'm not thrilled about DEET either, but that's what I use to prevent ticks from climbing up onto my body, and I don't like bites. And by the way, we're almost out of time, Terry, but we need to remind people about alpha-gal allergy when we talk about ticks.
That's right, because it's something that it has just come to our attention in the last couple of years, and perhaps not everybody knows about it. But the Lone Star tick, when it bites, and this is throughout the Southeast, can trigger a very peculiar delayed reaction allergy to eating red meat.
So if you wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and you have a bad bellyache and maybe you're having some trouble breathing, hives, and you wonder what the heck is going on, you go to the emergency department and they ask you, well, what did you do? What did you eat? And you say, well, nothing. I was sleeping. It may be an alpha-gal allergy, and that means that you were exposed to a tick and now you're allergic to meat, and the only answer is avoid meat.
And by the way, when it comes to removing ticks, tweezers, pull them straight out.
Yeah, no cigarettes, no weird remedies.
No Vaseline, no nail polish, none of that stuff.
Yeah, tweezers, pull them right out. Well, that is all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening to the People's Pharmacy. If you didn't get your question answered or you couldn't get through to share your story or your favorite home remedy, you can post a comment at peoplespharmacy.com or you can call 888-472-3366 and leave a message.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show and provided technical assistance. Peter Bombar, Robin Copley, Al Wodarski are our engineers. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Ocean Nasal Care Products, offering easier breathing for people suffering from allergies, sinusitis, a cold, or the flu. Online at oceannasalcare.com.
And by Blue Lizard Australian Sun Cream, providing high protection against both UVA and UVB sun exposure. Blue Lizard Sensitive is fragrance and paraben-free with zinc oxide for delicate skin. Online at bluelizard.net, the number 800-334-4286.
Next week on the People's Pharmacy, hazards in the hospital. What can you do to help your loved ones stay safe?
If you'd like to order a copy of today's show, the number is 800-732-2334, or you can find it at our website, peoplespharmacy.com.
You can also find our home remedies and quick and handy home remedies from the People's Pharmacy. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening. Please join us again next week.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to the People's Pharmacy.